Well, it's that time of year again. The leaves are falling and it's time to collect them and make leaf mould. So let's do it. These are awesome, aren't they? These are off my Paulownia tree in my back garden at home, because I don't live on a small holding here. I've got like a jungle garden, and I've had some leaves up to about 2 foot across. I just thought I'd show them for a bit of fun. But anyway, so I did a video on leaf mould last year, and this year I'm doing another one, but rather than just sort of showing you how to do it, I've done a few trials, and just to see, because you always see videos on leaf mould, don't you, online, you know, leaf mould in 2 months, leaf mould in 3 months, whatever. But that, to me, that always seems to involve adding something to it, like grass clippings or something, to sort of activate it and get it going a bit quicker. I don't want to do that in my leaf mould. I want just leaves. So what I've done is I've done some leaf mould, which I did this time last year. I did it in some bags, and I did a little video on this just to show what I was doing. So I've done it in bags. I did 6 bags, 3 with just a bit of rainwater, 3 with a bit of rainwater plus some of my lactobacillus bacteria that I made. I've done this bin here, which I layered with worms, leaves and worms all the way up, and that's broke down quite nicely. And I've done 2 bins just over the side here, one in wire again, but just left to it, and one in one of those sort of Dalek plastic composting bins, which I think it did dry out a little bit. I watered it a couple of times just with rainwater through the summer, and I'm just going to get those together today and just tip them out into the wheelbarrow and just see if anything has made any difference. I don't know that, I haven't even looked yet. I don't know that it has, just looking in the top of the bags. I don't know that it has, but we'll get out and we'll have a real good look at it. What I'm also going to do, I've got this leaf mould behind me, I haven't used it all. This is now a mixture of 2 and 3 year old leaf mould. So I'm going to barrow that out and put that over with my compost that's ready to go. And I'm going to dig out this leaf bin next to me and move that over to here so it can stay here for another year. So that's basically what I'm going to do today. And then I'm just going to show you how I do my potting mix. I mix it with compost and a bit of perlite, bit of vermiculite, just for potting and seeding mixes. So I'll show you how I use it too. I have got to a point, I've got a bit of leaf mould left, quite a bit of leaf mould left over. There's probably 6 to 8 barrow loads there, good heaped barrow loads left over. So I'm actually making more than I'm using, but it's really good for me because this year has been the first full year where I haven't bought any compost at all. I haven't bought a single bag, and that was always the plan for me. That was where I wanted to get. It's taken me a couple of years because the size of the veg garden and it being new and wanting to add a bit more than you normally perhaps would with no dig. You'd add, you know, an inch or so. I was sort of adding up to 4 inches for the first couple of years, just trying to get that depth of no dig because my soil is quite compacted and stony here. But now I've sort of got there with it a bit, and everything's catching up, and I'm now totally self-sufficient in compost and in leaf mould. So yeah, really happy with that. And I'm just going to show you these few little things today. So what I'll do is I'll dig this out now and move it. I'll show you it as well, the state of it. That's 2 and 3 year old leaf mould, and then I'll show you this to the side, which is 1 year old leaf mould, which I have just left because I kind of figured I was going to turn it with the tiller to try and fluff it up a bit, but I thought, you know, leaves really break down more with like a fungal action than bacteria, so fluffing it all up and aerating it probably isn't the best thing to do. So I decided to just leave it. So we'll dig that out and have a look at that. That's a year old, and I'll show you this stuff now. So this pile, like I say, has been sat here. This is a mixture of my first year of doing leaf mould properly on scale, and the leaves after that. So it's 2 and 3 year old leaf mould. I'm actually going to have to chuck this tarp because it's starting to disintegrate, so that's not great to get all these little bits of plastic out. But so if you look at that now, it's completely broken down. There's lots of worms in there, but this is perfect. I mean, that is just beautiful. Look at it. If you have a look at that, it's just light and fluffy, and that I run it through a sieve when I use it for seeding. I run it through a little sort of 1/8 of an inch sieve, and it's just beautiful stuff. It really helps to hold moisture. it can get a little soggy if you leave it out in the rain, even when mixed with compost. That's why I do put a bit of perlite and vermiculite with it, just to open it up a little bit. But that is what you want your leaf mould to look like, just nice and dark. Little stone there, nice and dark and fully broken down. And for me, it's patience. It's just time, bit of patience, and that is the best way to do it. I don't believe in adding anything to it. I want my leaf mould to be just leaves. So that's the idea. But so all this is completely broken down and is ready to go. And I'm just gonna move it now and stick it next to my finished compost so that it's there, ready for me to use. So I've just dug out the other bay, got 7 heaped barrows. So about what I thought. Beautiful stuff. Now this stuff I'm going to dig out and put into that bay to stay there another year. Like I say, this was piled in. I did shred some of it, but as the autumn went on last year and the leaves became progressively wetter as I was bagging them up, my little shredder, it just clogs when you get wet leaves. And this year I'm not going to shred any because we've had so much rain. I've got 8 sacks here that I got from a little job yesterday, and they're just sopping wet. They weigh, each bag probably weighs about 20 or 30 kilos, and it just clogs my shredder. There's no point. And I don't think it does make a bit of a difference, but I've got enough now that I can just give it the time it needs. It looks like Milo's digging out the leaves for me now. You dig in there, Milo, you get them out. But let's just have a look anyway. So I've completely left this. Bit of a clump there, but let's just have a dig into it and see what it looks like. So pretty much like I expected. I did last year's video on, showed some year-old leaf mould. So what you get, this sort of time scale after a year, you can still use this. I just run it through a sieve, you know, and you'll get chunks that you have to throw back in. But there's a lot of life. I can see little insects, little bugs and things. Haven't actually seen any worms yet, but there will be worms in it. But it's breaking down, it's getting there. There's a worm right there, little worm. So it's getting there. It's had a year, and like I say, you can sieve it and use it. But I just like to give it another year on top of that. So it's really getting there. And like I say, most of this was sieved, but to be honest, the top half wasn't sieved at all. And I don't know that's made much difference. Let's go down a bit deeper to where the sieve stuff would have been. Right down there at the bottom. And there's a few more worms, obviously they're coming up into it. Little young worms there. It doesn't look a lot different, so shredding it, because it takes so long, and like I say, my shredder keeps clogging, I don't think I'm going to bother shredding anymore, just because I can give it the time. I'm ahead of myself now, so I can give it the time just sitting there. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. That's looking really good. So I will dig this out at a later stage, but I'll just show you the other bins now as well. So this is the wire cage which I layered with worms all the way up to the top. Filled it right to the top and didn't add any more leaves to it, just let it break completely down. I haven't watered it or anything. It's been quite a wet year this year, so obviously with no lid on it, it didn't really need any watering. I've set the camera down low so you won't always see my beautiful face, but I think it's more important that you can see the worm bin than me. So I shall just try and pull this wire off as best I can. Leave that there. Oh, okay. There we go, it's moving now. Right, put this over here. So it looks quite leafy on the sides and top, but hopefully it's broken down a bit in the middle. What I'll do is I'll just move these bits of wood that we're holding the tarp on, and then I'll just push it over with the spade and see what it's like inside. So there you go, you've got a leafy outer layer, but that looks, I don't know, a bit leafy there, a bit of a bung on top. That looks about the same, I think. So I don't know that the worms made much of a difference. Now, what I did realise, and I never really thought about it before, is that leaves actually do heat up quite a lot when you put them in a pile. I think I put a thermometer in there and I think it got to about 50 degrees centigrade, if I remember rightly. So what might have happened is it might have either pushed all the worms completely out or pushed the worms to the side. So I don't know that the worms themselves would have made much difference. There's quite a few twigs in here. Must have raked this up from somewhere with a few twigs. But I don't know. That could be a little bit more broken down than the other pile. Like I say, you get the twigs out of it. A lot of it looks actually a little bit more broken down, so maybe that did help. That's quite interesting to know, because I'm just thinking, as I get an excess of worms in my worm bins, whenever I build up my piles of leaves, I could just throw some worms into them. So so I think it's not a miraculous difference. Like you get these patches where leaves are obviously really packed and they still look a bit leafy, but I reckon that might have actually worked. I reckon that has sped it up a bit, because if you compare that to the other side, apart from these odd chunks, it's looking a bit more like the pile that's been there a couple of years. So I reckon that might well have worked, you know. So that's worms and leaves. Looks like it sped it up a little bit. Not a huge difference, but it definitely looks a little bit more broken down in patches. Like I say, you get away from the edge. Yeah, I reckon that's, you know, maybe 20%, something like that. If you think of it percentage wise, maybe a sort of 20% sped it up. It looks a little bit more broken down, so that's pretty interesting. What I'll do now, because I'm here, is I'll get these bags that were just put in sacks and sealed up, and we'll have a look at those. So this was just another little trial. 3 sacks and 3 sacks, both filled to the brim and rolled down and left. A couple of holes punched in the bottom just with a knife. 3 of them with a little bit of lactobacillus water, watered on the top, just a couple of times through the summer. That was it. I did it. And the others just rainwater. These are the lactobacillus, these are the rainwater. So we'll tip them out. I'll tip out just the rainwater ones first into the barrow and just see if it's made any difference. But obviously just doing them in a bag as well, see if that's made any difference regardless of the water. So that looks really quite leafy. There's a few worms got in there, obviously come up through the holes in the bottom of the sack, starting to break down a bit at the bottom, but that doesn't look as broken down as just leaving them on the floor. And that's still fairly leafy as well. It's starting to go, you can feel at the bottom it's starting to kind of form a clump, not quite so leafy, but yeah, I see these videos and people do them in bags and they reckon it only takes a few months, but I didn't pay these much attention. Maybe that was the difference. I just left them to it, just gave them a little water through a couple of times, but yeah, not particularly impressed with that. You can see how leafy it still looks. That'll be fine. It'll go in the bottom of this pile and it'll all break down, but that's just rainwater. And I rolled the bags down, put a brick on top, and that was basically just left for a year. So that's just rainwater. And then just for comparison, This is rainwater with a bit of my lactobacillus that I made and stored with molasses sugar, just to store it, give it a longer shelf life. I just gave this a couple of waters with that. So again, quite leafy. A few more worms in there though. There's a bit more broken down in that middle, look. A little bit more in a patch, but still quite leafy at the bottom. Okay, that's a bit more broken down, still quite leafy. Still loads of worms though. The worms obviously love that molasses sugar. Look at them all. So that's probably the thing, isn't it? Maybe it isn't the lactobacillus, maybe it's the fact that that attracted the worms to it. So that is a bit more broken down. Still quite bitty compared. But yeah, whether that is the actual lactobacillus. Oh, that one was a bit of a wet one. Maybe the hole on that bag sealed itself up. Well, look at that. That isn't good. There's a whole chunk there. I think that bag sealed itself. That's sopping wet. So that hasn't broken down much at all. Obviously went all anaerobic. So yeah, so that bag obviously sealed itself. But the first two bags were definitely more broken down. But whether that, like I say, is the lactobacillus or the fact that the lactobacillus in the molasses sugar has attracted a lot of worms in, up through the holes in the bottom of the bag. Could be that. But anyway, it's quite interesting. I'm not going to bother with doing it this way in bags again. It's just on a small scale. If you've just got a little back garden or something, obviously it will work. Maybe you just need to pay them a bit more attention. You know, keep them moist. Try and get a few worms in there. That will speed it up. You know, people do put a few grass clippings and things in to speed it up. Like I say, I don't want to do that. But it will work. Another year and this will probably be quite usable. Yeah, loads of worms in this one though. But yeah, so whether the lactobacillus made a difference or not, I don't know. But I think it's probably the worms that made the difference, that were attracted to the sugar. But this way will work, obviously. It's just not something I'm going to do on the scale that I get leaves, but doing it in bags does work. So these are my last two little experiments. This was just a wire filled to the brim with leaves, no worms added, just left and watered, I think once, although we had quite a wet year. I don't think I did water this one actually. I watered this one about twice, again just with rainwater, both of them, no molasses, lactobacillus, no worms added. This one I reckon isn't going to be great because I reckon that the heat just dried the leaves out, possibly. I haven't dug it out yet, but we'll have a look. But it looked a bit crispy on top, so I reckon that's going to be dry. This one, similar to the worms, but it'd be interesting to see if the worm one actually was more broken down than this. So let's dig them out and have a look. Put a couple of pegs in this one because it was just chicken wire, just to hold that tight. Ooh, got to watch these nettles. Let me just cut these nettles back quickly. There you go, get the nettles out of the way. Right. So again, it looks pretty leafy on the outside. Similar sort of thing, quite a big coating of sort of unbroken down leaves, more than the worm bin for sure. That whole wedge was most of the top, but right in the centre there, look, is a little nugget, a little nugget of black gold. So that has broken down pretty well actually, in fact really well. That is definitely on par with the one with the worms. Yeah, that's easily on par. So, I mean, there's worms in it. Yeah, so I mean, adding the worms, I don't really know that makes a whole load of difference, judging by this one, because that's pretty good in the middle. So yeah, interesting. Let's have a look at this plastic one. So again, a bit leafy on the top. Oh, that doesn't look too bad actually. In the middle there. It started to go, but yeah, that's still quite leafy. That's not quite as broken down as the ones that are just left out. It's a bit drier. There's not as much weight to it for sure, and it's a bit more got that sort of leaf structure to it. It has broken down a bit. That's a bit moister there, I think. So perhaps that plastic has just dried it a little bit too much. So yeah, that's definitely, there's no real weight to that, and it is definitely more leafy. So yeah, I think the way forward really, for me anyway, it's open bins. And I think if you have a garden, even a fairly small garden, I just think if you can put a circle of wire, even a small one, even if it's only a couple of feet across, I think a wire bin, and keep it watered, keep it moist, and keep it in contact with the ground. Don't put it up on anything. Keep it in contact with the ground so the worms can get into it. I think that's the way forward. And like I say, after 1 year you can use it and sieve it. You can use it straight away anyway, just as a mulch. But when I say using it, I mean as a potting on compost or as a seeding mix. You want it a bit more broken down. So yeah, I think a wire enclosure open to the elements is definitely the way forward. So I actually just checked that last sack of leaves. It was really wet, and there were no holes in the bottom, so I must have forgotten to stab a couple of holes in the bottom of that one, and that's why it was soaking wet. So anyway, last thing I want to do is just to show you what I do to make my potting on and seeding composts. So I always keep a pot of seeding compost ready to go, and this is just all sieved with perlite and stuff added. So basically I've got 2 sieves that I use. This is a 1/2 inch sieve, 1/2 inch holes, which I tend to use that for potting on, because I'm not too worried about sort of extra slight chunks in that. And then for seeding composts, I use this one, which is 1/4 inch sieve, and I've got these little green trugs, and these sieves just sit perfectly in the top of the trug like that, so you can scoop in, and it's like you're panning for gold. So what I do, I've changed my compost shack a little bit. I've actually got rid of 2 bays, this bay and the middle bay. So what I do now is I put all my compost, all my material into the compost, into the end bay, and I can control the moisture that way as I fill it up. And I then move, and I'm outside composting now. I just wanted to make a bit more use of the storage under here for straw bales and things for the chickens, and also to be able to store finished product that is ready for me to use, finished compost and finished leaf mould. I've just put a divider of a bit of plastic in. So just, you know, I just put my compost now to finish and mature outside with a tarp over it once it's at the moisture that I want. And it just gives me this inside space now. So basically, for making a potting on or a seeding compost, I use the same sort of mix. I do perhaps tend to add a little bit more perlite and vermiculite to the seeding compost so it doesn't get too wet. But basically I use finished compost. Put a few scoops in there, and these trugs are ideal. You can just wiggle them like this. It just sits in there, and it's absolutely perfect. Fits the treat. So this compost is basically finished, and when I moved it over here, I tilled it all up so it got the big chunks out. You can't, ouch. Got the big chunks out, but there are still bits of wood chip and bit of newspaper and stuff in here, so I always sieve through it anyway. So put 6 scoops in. I'm probably sieving through about 1.5 scoops per 3 scoops. So that's probably about 2 scoops, 3 scoops of compost. Nicely sieved, really nice and friable. And that's the other good thing with bringing the compost back in here once it's matured and ready to be used. And the same now with the leaf mould. And obviously my worm bin is under here as well. It means that I can control the moisture. I just dug this leaf mould out at the beginning of the video, and it is starting to get quite claggy. We've had a lot of rain recently and it is quite wet, so it'd be nice to keep it in here. I'll get a little bit of rain drive in onto it, but I can at least control the moisture then and just keep it just slightly moist so that it keeps the bacteria, all the living organisms alive. So this will tend to sieve a bit better than the compost because you haven't got all the wood chip and stuff in it. So I'm going for about 50-50 is what I try to do. It's just, like I say, it's a little bit claggy, so you tend to get it ball up a little bit sometimes. If it's too wet, you want it just sort of moist enough that it holds a bit but crumbles nice and easily. Well, you are getting smothered in wet leaf mould. So I reckon that will probably be about 50-50. So something like that anyway. So that now is sieved compost and sieved leaf mould. And what I would usually do when I'm doing potting on or seeding mixes is I would also add to this a couple of scoops of my worm compost. I haven't got any at the moment, so I won't put that in, but I would put a bit of the worm compost in and sieve that into it as well in both mixes. And then what I do is I get these big sacks of perlite and vermiculite. I think they are 100 litres if I remember rightly. Yeah, 100 litre bags. And you can put varying amounts in. So for seeding compost, I like it to be quite airy. I don't want the seeds getting too sopping wet, so I'd perhaps put a couple of scoops in. And I just kind of eyeball it really. I don't have an absolutely set mix, but what I do is I get my other bucket and I just tip it from bucket to bucket. Just put this dog whistle in there. So I just tip it from bucket to bucket a few times. And it just slowly mixes together. So like I say, what I tend to do is when I'm doing a lot of seeding, I've got this big yellow trug here. I think that's a 80 litre trug. And I'll just spend half an hour, do a few batches of this and just fill that yellow trug up so it's there ready to go whenever I'm seeding. So that's starting to mix quite nicely now. Like I say, it's just a few times, it takes a few minutes. That's all, I reckon. One more and we'll be about there. So that is about the mix that I would do for seeding. It's quite heavy on the perlite and vermiculite. I have used it without perlite and vermiculite and it's fine. It does work absolutely fine, but what I found, and I don't know if it's just because it's my homemade compost or whether it's the leaf mould, it does hold moisture really well. I mean, I suppose that's you know, why leaf mould and that makes such a great mulch is it holds the moisture in. And I've just noticed that a few pots, if you get, you know, a period when you're getting a lot of rain and drizzle and cold, it just seems to get a bit claggy, and I've had a few things that didn't like it. It was obviously a bit too wet. So as a precaution, because I don't live here and I leave everything out, and you know, if we get a wet day it could be out for hours before I get to come down and put it under cover, I just go a bit heavy on the perlite and the vermiculite, and at that sort of concentration there, it's quite airy, and the seeds, they just seem to like that. For potting on, I'd put a bit less in. In fact, this mix that I've done here, I think this was for potting on, obviously later in the season, and you can see it's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit lighter, twig there. It is a little bit wetter because the rain beat it in on it, but it's a little bit lighter on the vermiculite and perlite if you compare the two. So that would be more my seeding, and that sort of amount would be more for potting on. And yeah, this year it's all I've used, and everything's been perfect. In fact, I'll say it's better than the compost that I bought or used to buy. I mean, I did always go for the cheapest compost I could get because I use quite a lot. But this year, like I say, I haven't bought a single bag, and it's been really nice, you know, just to feel free from having to buy compost at £6 or £7 or more for decent stuff. You could be looking up to £8 or £9 or £10 a bag. It's just crazy. Yes, that's my seeding mix. Potting mix, slightly less of the vermiculite and perlite, but yeah, so that's it. That's another leaf mould video. I hope you found it useful, guys. You know, maybe it gave you a few ideas. Like I say, I always say this, I'm no expert. Yes, I do it all, and I'm learning as I go, but I am no expert. So it's just really showing you what I do. I'll never try and tell you what to do. I'll just try to give you some advice and that. So I hope it helps you. Please like and subscribe if you like anything that I'm doing here. And I hope you're enjoying the videos and the channel, guys. So take it easy, and we'll see you next time.